Hey guys, Sarah Picaro here. Today's video is going to be talking about directly how a difficult childhood affects us in adulthood. So if you've had a difficult childhood, you more than likely are educated and aware of acronyms like CPTSD. And I know it's not childhood post-traumatic stress disorder, but sometimes that C can be replaced for other things. And I have other videos on that as well. It can be complex. It can be confusion about post-traumatic stress disorder, because when you experience a difficult childhood, it was never just a singular event. It was never just one argument that your mom and dad had over you and your siblings, or about where you were going to go to school, or about you cleaning up your room or doing your homework. CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's seen in a lot of people who had a difficult childhood, right? Or even a seemingly normal childhood where everything was fine, everything was normal. Yeah, you're just like everyone else. Your parents got divorced, but there are deep implications of having a complex childhood, or even what can be labeled as a difficult childhood, and oftentimes a seemingly normal childhood, a childhood in which your parents had you and your family move a lot. That can be difficult because it became difficult to establish connections and relationships with people that you're going to school with. And you may always have one foot in and one foot out, because the first experience that you had of that, maybe, and it's just something simple as changing schools, felt very, very painful, very traumatic, and very dramatic, thus very difficult. So next time you moved, you had some resistance. You didn't want to get too close to people because you didn't want to feel the pain of leaving again or having been left again. So this plays out in every part of our lives, in every area of all of our relationships, the relationships that we have with people at our job, with our family, with our community members, even the relationship most significantly that we have with ourselves. So let's dive into how these difficult childhoods affect us in adulthood, because they are the basis and the foundation of our adulthood. Childhood is where these beliefs about ourselves, the secure or the anxious or avoidant attachments are established, rooted and grounded in. And sometimes when we're thinking back on this, we may be thinking, you know what, I had a normal childhood, or yeah, there were some parts of it that were difficult, but nothing that was, too bad or too dramatic. So there's no way that my childhood can now be linked to the problems that I'm having in adulthood today. But they're always connected, they're always related. So they're always so important to get crystal clear on, and to get to the very core and the root of those beliefs that your mind has established because of those past traumatic events or normal events. So sometimes the link is obvious. Sometimes it's not so obvious. Sometimes it's not what you think it is. Sometimes it's something different from what you think it is. And you spend so much time in your mind trying to figure out what it is so that you don't have to feel that feeling that you feel when you think about it, right? You want to be able to get to a place where you think about it, you know it was there, you can't go back and change the past, but you can disconnect from the strong negative and limiting emotions that are connected to that past. That's what we do through transformational healing work, because sometimes you can think about it, know that that's part of it, but that's more than likely not all of it. And sometimes that connection becomes blurry, becomes a little fuzzy. And that's where people step in and describe it as, I'm not sure. It kind of just feels foggy, right? Brain fog or confusion or frustration. It just feels like there's a block in my mind. I can't even see it. I don't even know that it's there, right? There are memories of the past that are blocked out. I don't remember a lot from my childhood. That's the category that I'm in. So why are our childhood years so important, and how do they affect the rest of our lives? Well, let's first dive into that, and then we'll get into how a difficult childhood affects us in adulthood. During childhood is when your brains are developing, and the brain and mind are different, right? You've got your brain, which is the organ, but your mind is something separate, something different, something unique. Your brain is the organ, and that is the organ that's developing in childhood, most significantly in the first 3 years or in the first 5 years, right? I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me on that, but in the beginning, right, is when your brain develops. And there are pathways, neurological pathways that are solidified during adolescence. That's those neural pathways, the NLP, neuro linguistic programming. So you can reprogram those pathways. You can create new pathways, especially if the pathways that your brain are on now are leading you to feelings of anxiety, depression, worry, shame, guilt, heaviness, leading you to self-harming and self-sabotaging behaviors. You can change and reprogram those pathways. You can't just wave a magic wand and it happens. It does take work. And that's where transformational healing really comes in, because you connect with the neural pathways that were there and get them on a new path so that your life is set on a new direction in a new way. Another foundation in childhood is your nervous system. Your nervous system is there to guide you, is there to protect you, is there to keep you safe, even before you become verbal. And during the brain development stages, the early stages, you don't have language development yet, but you have a development of a system of neurological pathways that are having you know when something is hot. You put your hand on a stove, you know that it's hot, and you remove your hand because there's a connection through the neurons that say pain, pain, go away. So you pull your hand back. And all of these systems are intertwined and connected. They're not separate from each other. And we're in a similar state of this. And I want to address this because a lot of people say, oh, I'm kind of afraid of hypnosis. Hypnosis is just the ability to connect, to deeply connect with what is within you. It's the ability to imagine and to connect. And some say there's studies out there that say that it's a similar state to hypnosis up until the age of 7. That's when all of those foundations are formed. You're in this beautifully imaginative state, this creative state. And that's the power of hypnosis, the power of your mind, not your brain. Remember, that's the organ, your mind, your ability to imagine, your ability to create, your ability to deeply connect and see things differently than an adult would, right? An adult sometimes sees this black and white because we're viewing and seeing things through this filter of past experiences and our beliefs. So children don't have that yet. It's forming, right? They're laying the foundation for it. So from 0 to 7, there are studies that say that children are in this state of hypnosis, in the state of imagination, in the state of this ability to create and see things differently and to call in different things. That's why children, don't really have the same worries and anxieties as adults. And you may realize, I was actually happy when I was a child. I was free. I loved to play. I was carefree. I didn't have social anxiety. I wasn't worried about, what this little kid at me at school thought about me and what I wore. I wore it and I danced proudly, and I was unafraid to dance and didn't have a care about who was watching. Because in these years, we're absorbing. Children are like sponges. They absorb these messages and these beliefs about the world and the people around them, and they start to learn from the adults and people around them what's okay, what's not okay, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And that's that intuition. And that intuition, unfortunately, gets covered up, gets a pile of a bunch of other stuff put on top of it. And so as adults, we more easily go against our intuition because of these messages that we've received, that we've held on to, that have shaped and formed the beliefs that we have about ourselves. And those are the patterns of behavior that become developed, that carry through adulthood. We observe, we mimic other people, we learn things, some healthy things, some unhealthy things. We learn how to manage or cope with stress, or how to blow up every time we're stressed. We learn how to be in relation with other people. We learn through our parents and our caregivers and people around us that if you have a conflict, you fight it out. You fight it out verbally, verbally or physically, right? Depending on what you saw other people do. You learn that you run away from conflict. If there is conflict, that's that flight response kicked in, or the fight response. You learn to fawn. You learn to just kind of submit and be a doormat and just, appease that angry person so that they'll stop being angry. So you learn all of those things, and all of those trauma responses, the fight, the fleas, the fawn, they get stuck in your body, and they become programming that becomes installed in your mind that you go to every time another experience like one in the past comes into your life. You go back to that. It's like a default programming, a default mechanism, a protective mechanism. This person's angry. Okay, run away, get out of there, because that's what you saw mom do every time her and dad got in an argument before they got divorced, right? And then after the divorce, mom stopped running away because now they didn't live together. So now you saw mom fight back verbally. So you learn these things. So when someone gets angry, you either run away or fight back, because that's what I saw mom do. That's the way it's always been. And you don't ever just forget about these things magically or suddenly. That day you turn 18 or that day you turn 21, everything in childhood and adolescence stays with you. It became that programming. It became the foundation of your life that's formed and stays with you into adulthood until you recognize and realize the patterns, the harm that staying in those patterns is causing you, and do something unconsciously to change it. Consciously, you can journal about it, you can listen to affirmations, you can read books, you can listen to podcasts, and that only informs you on a conscious level. And then it takes conscious effort to implement those things that all those things told you to do. You listen to something on a podcast and they said, every time you feel anxiety, do this. And you have to consciously remember and think about doing that when you feel that. But why that doesn't work majority of the time is because it takes conscious effort. And you cannot override the unconscious programming with conscious effort. It takes so much awareness to do that, but that unconscious programming is about 90 to 95% of your mind, not your brain, remember, your mind. So if you don't like the way you do something or that you do something, it takes so much brain power, energy, and effort to try and override a conscious thought or feeling with conscious effort, because what's really running that show is the unconscious programming that was established in childhood. All of those patterns, all those neural pathways that are deep, that are worn in, right? And so now you're trying to go, oh, well, every time you feel that, just do this instead. But you're in that energy, you're in that moment, you're in that response that's connected to all those times in the past that you felt those same feelings and had that same automatic response. And now it becomes an automatic thing. You feel triggered, I eat, right? you feel like you had a stressful day at work, I'm going to turn to a bottle of wine at night, right? Because that's what mom did. Yeah. And, mom never got belligerent or anything, so it was okay. She never got crazy, but that's what mom did. She turned to alcohol, or she turned to an argument. And so now that's what I turn to. That's what I do when I feel the same feeling. I feel stressed, I do this. I feel frustrated, I do that. It's because of that unconscious programming. So a difficult childhood impacts you in adulthood. And I use the word difficult, and I, like, in the beginning of this video, we talked about CPTSD. That can be complex, that can be chaotic, that can be a confusing childhood. I don't ever think that there's just one hard solid. It was complex and it means this by definition. That's helpful information. But the C can stand for complex, it can stand for chaotic, it can stand for confusing. And it's all kinds of little traumas, right? It doesn't have to be just the big single event, one T trauma. It's all those things, all the times that you saw mom do that, all the times that you heard dad do that, all the times that happened and you felt this inside, what you learned to do as a result of that. And a difficult childhood, a chaotic childhood, a confusing childhood can lead to relationships becoming confusing and painful, can lead to relationships being a certain way. And you may find that you're in a pattern and a cycle of relationships within yourself. You're attracting narcissistic partners. You're attracting emotionally unavailable partners because that's what you saw model for you growing up. Or maybe it wasn't that at all. Maybe you just didn't feel safe in your place, in your family. And now you're no longer a child living with your parents and living with your siblings, but you still have that same feeling of feeling unsafe in your relationships. And maybe where you see this most significantly is that you don't feel safe in the relationship that you have with your boss at work or with a colleague at work, and you don't feel safe to speak up. So it's all relationships. It's not just one relationship, but relationships can become confusing and they can become painful, and you may not understand why at a conscious level. So maybe now you're out reading books about relationships and how to make good relationships, but you don't understand that internal conflict and confusion. You don't understand why no matter how many books you read, they still feel painful and they still feel confusing and you don't understand how to break out of your own cycle, pattern, and way of being in the relationship that you recognize and realize contributes to the relationship being that way. That's part of a difficult childhood and how it affects you in adulthood. Another way that a difficult childhood affects you in adulthood is your self-esteem, your self-worth. It leads to low self-esteem. It leads to low self-worth. Maybe there's a little bit there. Thank goodness you can get out of bed and go to work in the morning, but you have really low self-esteem. And that also can lead to self-harming, self-sabotaging behaviors. Maybe you don't even put yourself out there to get into relationships. Maybe you break up with a person right when it starts to get serious. Low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-confidence can lead to missed opportunities. It can lead to unhealthy choices. It can lead to you projecting this version or this image of you that's not actually who you are because you're playing that people pleaser role. You want people to like you because you think if people like you, that'll increase your self-esteem, your self-confidence, and your self-worth. And so you put this projected image of you out there, and then you hold and carry all this shame because you feel like they don't even really know me. And then you feel disconnected in relationships, which leads to even lower self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-worth because you're like, who am I? Why do I do this? I hate that I do that. I want them to know the real me. I want them to like and love the real me. I don't even know the real me because the real me wouldn't do that. The real me is somewhere deep in there. I got to get him out, right? But you may not know how to, and this may lead to missed opportunities and unhealthy choices. It may lead to you not being confident or believing in yourself enough to put yourself out there to make healthy choices so that you have better opportunities. Maybe this shows up in your work and now your job is plateaued or the financial level that you're at has plateaued and you think there's no way I can make more money. Maybe it leads to money blocks or all kinds of emotional blocks or all kinds of external blocks where you just think, no, I can't, or you don't even put yourself out there to try and do something more or something different or something better because of your low self-esteem, self-worth, and low self-confidence. So a difficult childhood or childhood trauma also leads to difficulty in managing stress in healthy ways. We all have stress. We live in the 21st century. We all have stress. There is stress out there. There is stress in here. But a difficult childhood and one that has a history of being complex, confusing, chaotic, leads to even more stress. And we all live with stress, but it leads to unhealthy ways of managing that stress. Again, links to self-harm, self-sabotage. It leads to you living a life in survival mode. That is that is not a fun mode to live your life in when you're living in survival mode. I just did a video about the difference between surviving and thriving. So if you didn't see that yet, make sure to go check that out. But it leads to you living a life in survival mode, not a life that you love, not a life where you're doing what you feel called to do, not a life where you just fully and openly embrace and accept all the things that life has to offer, the good, the bad, the challenges, knowing that those are opportunities to allow you to grow and make yourself a better version of who you were yesterday. So you may wake up feeling every day like I'm an even worse version of who I was yesterday. And that starts to get really, really heavy and starts to make it really difficult to get out of bed the next day. So make sure that what you're doing in your life is taking you the right direction, leading you on the right path, and leading you to one that lives a thriving life, not one where you're stuck in survival mode. Another impact of a difficult childhood in adulthood is you feel like you're on this chaotic, crazy roller coaster, a roller coaster of emotions. Maybe you wake up feeling depressed, but then you meditate until you feel better. And then someone says something to you or doesn't say anything to you, just gives you a certain look. And then you, right? You spiral down again. It leads to you struggling with self-worth and riding this roller coaster and these waves of emotions every day, which has you feel high and low and up and down. And every time you do that, there's chemicals responding in your body. So you become addicted to that feeling of a roller coaster because the crazy, chaotic, confusing childhood that was implanted and programmed into you in your childhood now becomes what you're familiar with, what you're comfortable with. Even though you don't like riding that wave of motion and roller coaster every day, you're familiar with it. It's what you know. And you can't even imagine a life where you get off that roller coaster and choose a different ride, one that's fun, one that's soothing, one that you're actually excited to ride, not one that scares you, that scares the crap out of you and going, oh, I hate this feeling. So if you're tired of riding that roller coaster of anxiety and depression and struggling with self-worth, you've got to go within. You've got to heal those inner wounds that were caused because of your upbringing, because of all the craziness, because of the confusion, because of the chaos. That's not a way to live an adult life. You maybe didn't have any say in it when it came to childhood because you were a child, you were dependent on the adults around you, but you have a say now. You have a say as an adult. You can take control as an adult and make choices that are best for you. Make the decision to invest in yourself and to heal those inner unhealed wounds and to change the neural pathways, change the programming that your mind runs on. Give your mind an update. That's what transformational healing does. It basically gives your mind an update. It's like a phone. Right? Every now and then we get this message, hey, we need to update the program. We need to update the software. Click here to begin. You do the same thing with your mind. And it doesn't take years and years and years of diving into a very chaotic, very traumatic past. Leave those things where they were so that you can significantly change your future and live one that's thriving, not one that's stuck in survival mode. So if you're ready to do that, I would love to connect with you. But in the meantime, I hope you found this video helpful into understanding how a difficult childhood impacts your adulthood, your relationships, your decisions, your feelings, and your beliefs about yourself, your thoughts. It impacts everything. So when you heal and clear all that out, then you can move into that space of thriving, of loving every part of your life. So again, you can always find more information in the links below to connect, find more information out about transformational healing, check out the results and what other people have said about having gone on that journey themselves. All right, guys, until then, be well and take care. See you soon.